I'm about to start.
Good evening. Good evening, everyone. We're going to get started soon. Wait for a few more people to come on in. Welcome, welcome, welcome. Good evening.
All right, Ashley, Miss Ashley, our numbers have stopped rolling in. So I think we can get ready to start.
Okay. Well, good evening and welcome, everyone. Thank you for joining us today for our April Dunn Act, A Parent's Guide to Understanding the Law. And we are Families Helping Families Region 7. And we are co-hosting with Families Helping Families of Southwest Louisiana today. My name is Zandra Ashley. I am the education specialist for Families Helping Families Region 7. I am a Bossier City native, a mother of 3, a wife of 22 years. Nothing is more important to me than education and advocating for our young people. I enjoy doing it day in and day out. I love being a part of what Families Helping Families is doing here in Region 7 and as a whole. I'm going to first introduce Mr. Wallace Johnson, who is the Education Support Specialist for Families Helping Families of Southwest Louisiana.
Hi, welcome everyone. Good evening. I'm glad y'all are here to learn about this topic of the April Dunn Act, the Parents Guide. I'm on staff at Families Helping Families, and I'm a education support specialist. I'm a person living with a disability, and through my experience with high school and all that, living with a disability, my heart has always been reaching out to those with transition issues. But I do help out with other areas as well. And I'm glad to be invited to this. Thank you for inviting me. And I hope everyone learned something.
Thank you. Okay, and we also have Rebecca Hansberry, the LDOE for April Dunn Act. She's the April Dunn Act consultant, and she is with Families Helping Families of Southwest Louisiana. Thank you for being here.
Thanks a lot, Xandra. I appreciate it. Actually, I work through a contract with the Department of Ed, and I work directly with Ashley Augustine, who is actually here as well with the LDOE. Ashley, you want to say hello?
Hey, can you guys hear me?
Yes, we sure can.
Awesome. So good evening, everyone. Glad to be here and represent the department today.
All right. Xandra, would you like us to go ahead and get started? What would you like us to do next?
I believe we can go ahead and get started, Chanel, if that's okay.
That's perfect.
Okay. Yes, ma'am.
All right. So one of my favorite things to present on as far as the April Dunn Act is concerned is the presentation that we've created. Ashley and I worked on together, and that's the parent one. I think it's where the rubber meets the road, and it's extremely important that you as parents understand how April Dunn can help your child that has a disabilities navigate the requirements of the high school diploma. So in order to do that, you have to have a pretty good understanding of where to start. And that's what we're going to talk about tonight. A little bit of background on myself. I used to work for the department back in 2014, whenever at that time Act 833 was passed. And later it became in 2020, I think it was, later became the April Dunn Act. So I helped the department roll it out along with another couple of teammates. And so then about 4 or 5 years ago, they contacted me and said, hey, we want to do some new guidance. And we started working on it. Ashley and I have. And we've created a lot of new guidance. Same message from 2014, just in a new pattern, right? Packaged in a different way. Easy, very easy to find on the website. I'm going to show you how to find it at the end of this presentation. And everything is now about April Dunn is all in one place. Used to, you would have to go searching in a couple of 3 places around the Louisiana Belize website to try to find information. We've now located everything in one area to make it easier. All right. So let's go ahead and get started. And a little bit of housekeeping. If you have a question, you'll notice that there's different sections of the presentation tonight. And when I get to the end of each section, I'm going to pause and ask if there are any questions. 2 ways you can respond. You can either put your question in the chat, or you can unmute yourself and ask a question that way. I don't mind if you interrupt at all. If you're anything like me, if you don't ask the question when you're thinking about it, you forget if you try to wait until either the end of the presentation or the end of a section. So I really don't mind if you interrupt. I do ask that you try your best to keep your questions limited to the topic that we're talking about. There's a lot of times whenever we can start talking about really specific in the weeds situations. And that's when things definitely can go down a rabbit hole quickly. If you have a child that is currently in a particular situation with the April Dunn Act, and you have a question, and you'd like to talk specifically about your child's situation, then we can wait and hold off until the end of the presentation, and we can talk with you offline if you'd like. Ashley and I are both going to include our, no, Wallace, I haven't put up the PowerPoint yet. I will shortly. Ashley and I are going to put our email addresses in the chat box, and you're more than welcome to email me or Ashley. I will ask, if you send an email to me, please copy Ashley. And I am not working for the Department of Ed directly. I work with them through a contract. So it's important that we always keep the department in the loop. Okay. All right. Let's go ahead. I'm going to throw up that presentation now on the screen, and you should be able to see it. If you cannot see it, please respond in the chat. And by the way, Ashley is going to be monitoring the chat this evening. All right. So if you do have a question that just cannot wait, please go ahead and put that question in the chat box. Okay. So tonight we're going to take a look at the April Dunn Act, a parent guide to understanding the law. So what we hope to do is to provide an overview of the act itself. We have to look at the graduation requirements in Louisiana. If you don't understand the graduation requirements, it's going to be really tough to understand how April Dunn plays a role in helping your child achieve those requirements. We're going to look at eligibility for the April Dunn Act. eligibility is twofold, and we're going to make sure you understand how your child can become eligible for these provisions. And we're going to look at individual performance criteria. What does that even mean? How is it communicated? Where do you put this criteria? What the criteria should look like? How do they develop? How does that IEP team develop those criteria and apply it to your child's high school experiences? We're going to give you some tips to help your child succeed. And then we're going to look at a resource that was developed for you. Okay. So the April Dunn Act is basically a law, and it is a law. Okay. And that's important to remember. It's named after a Baton Rouge local, April Dunn. Miss Dunn was the champion for students with disabilities. Unfortunately, she passed away in 2020. She got COVID, and that's one of the things that the governor, why he renamed this law from Act 833 to the April Dunn Act, was to honor her. The law basically allows students, oh, I'm so sorry, trying to get out of this chat. The law basically allows students with disabilities that are eligible, they meet that criteria, to earn a high school diploma by meeting certain graduation requirements through individual performance criteria that are created by their team, their IEP team. So in other words, it allows if your child has a disability and has an IEP, it allows your child to meet certain graduation requirements via IEP goals and objectives that are developed by the IEP team. Okay. Now, to fully understand the April Dunn Act, we first have to understand what your child must do to earn a Louisiana high school diploma. So now we're going to talk about graduation requirements in Louisiana. This is kind of the intro, but I'm going to go ahead and pause right now and make sure that everything's okay. Anybody have any questions? Everybody can see me. Everybody okay? Ashley, do we have anything going on in the chat?
Nothing so far, Rebecca.
Okay, thanks a bunch. So we're going to go ahead. Guys, we're going to try our best to get you out of here in by 6 o'clock, but if we can't, please forgive me. We're going to go a little longer until we make sure everybody understands April Dunn. All right. So basically, Louisiana has two choices or two pathways your child can take to earn a diploma in high school. They're either going to pick the university pathway or the Jumpstart pathway. The university pathway is a traditional high school pathway that you and I probably think about whenever we think about getting a diploma in high school. It prepares your child to go to a 4-year college. The Jumpstart pathway is more of a career pathway. It still prepares your child for a post-secondary education, but it's more preparation for a 2-year community college. It also prepares your child to go to work straight out of high school. All right. The university pathway requires that a student do the following to earn a diploma. So they have to earn a minimum of 24 Carnegie credits. That means they're going to take classes, and those classes each count as Carnegie credits, right? They've got to earn 24 of them. And there's certain things that they have to take to, so many math, so many sciences, so many Englishes, so many science courses. And then there's certain electives. All right. They also have to take state assessments. These state assessments are called LEAP 2025 assessments, and they have to score a certain score, approaching basic or above. All right. And they take these courses, and if I'm breaking this down into really elementary type understanding, I'm not trying to insult anybody. I just want to make sure we have a very good foundation to work from. So they take these tests after certain courses. For example, English 1 has a LEAP 2025 assessment. English 2 has a LEAP 2025 assessment. Algebra 1, geometry, biology, U.S. history. Those courses all have a LEAP 2025 assessment. Very soon, civics will have a LEAP 2025 assessment. Okay, they've got to take those assessments, and they have to make a certain grade on those assessments, a certain score of approaching basic or higher. And those scores, whatever numerical score they get on that assessment, not only do they have to pass the assessment, but that score that they get is figured into their overall grade in that class. All right. They also have to complete a free application for federal student aid. It's called a FAFSA. So after successful completion of all of these requirements, your child will leave with a diploma ready to attend four-year college. All right. Now, let's take a look at the other pathway, the Jumpstart pathway, and see how it compares. So on the if your child is on a Jumpstart pathway, which by the way, your child, I think they're sort of pushing for this decision to be made earlier in high school. But my last knowledge was they have to make this decision, which pathway they're going to go, which pathway they're going to choose by the end of the 10th grade. But like I said, I think they may be pushing kids to make that decision a little earlier now. All right. So the Jumpstart pathway, the student is required to earn a minimum of 23 Carnegie units. Okay. So not 24. Now they earn 23. They have to take those same assessments. They have to score approaching basic or above on the state assessments, those LEAP 2025 assessments that come at the end of certain courses, just like we discussed in the university pathway. Then there's one more thing that they have to do, and they have to earn a credential or something that's called an industry-based certification. I'll give you an example. Let's say a student that goes on the Jumpstart pathway, they decide that at the end of their pathway, they want to be a welder. So they take certain courses related to welding. They learn to weld. It is 100% possible that by the end of high school, your child could leave high school and be a certified welder. Get a job, because there's such a high demand for welders in this state. Get a job, walk into a job making $60,000 to $70,000 a year. Completely 100% possible. This industry-based certification is what your child would leave with. It's a certificate. They take a test, they get a certification saying, yes, they are now a certified welder. Okay? And they also have to complete a FAFSA. All right? So after successful completion of the Jumpstart pathway, your child could actually leave with a diploma, an industry-based certification, and ready to go to work or continue their education at a community college. All right. So when we're comparing these two pathways, you see that there are similar requirements. including those state assessments. This is a graduation requirement on both pathways, those state assessments. If your child is eligible for the April Dunn Act, the IEP team has the right to develop individual performance criteria or goals and objectives for your child to show they have mastered and understand the course material in lieu of achieving a passing score on that state assessment. So I want you to understand what I'm saying. April Dunn Act is all about the state assessment, or on a jumpstart pathway, the IBC requirement. I'll give you a little bit of history of the April Dunn Act. The people that wrote the April Dunn Act wanted to provide a way for kids with disabilities they wanted to remove the roadblock of the state assessment requirement. They showed that many studies have been done that proves that standardized state assessments are extremely challenging for students with disabilities. So they felt like it was an unfair challenge. So instead of a student with a disability, the state assessment, let me back up for 1 second. The state assessment, the LEAP 2025 state assessment, is a standardized test. And what it gives the student, what it tests the student in, English 1, English 2, biology, US history, algebra 1, and geometry, what it shows when the student takes that test is meant to show that the student has mastered English 1. They've mastered the content of English 2 and all those other core subjects, right? So what the IEP team, what the authors of April Dunn said was, no, standardized tests such as these LEAP 2025 tests, they're very challenging, unfairly so, to our kids with disabilities. So what we want is the IEP team to look at this child and determine how are they going to show that they have mastered English 1. And the way that they said they would show is that the IEP team would create individual performance criteria or goals and objectives. And that will allow a student with a disability that qualifies, that meets the eligibility criteria for April Dunn, to show, in lieu of achieving that state test requirement, that they have mastered the course content. Okay? Now, I'm going to pause because next we're going to take a look at how your child becomes eligible for the April Dunn Act. But first, I want to make sure that you understand the two pathways, the graduation requirements of each pathway, and how the April Dunn Act interacts or plays a role in those requirements. Any questions? Okay.
No questions in the chat, Rebecca.
All right. Thanks, Ashley. There is one thing I want to make very clear. Your child must pass the course. April Dunn, the goals and objectives do not apply to the course. Your child must meet the requirements of the Carnegie unit. Okay? Now, let's look at eligibility. So who's eligible for the April Dunn Act? Well, any student with a disability, as defined in this reg right here, RS 17:1942B, except a student identified as gifted and talented and who has no other exceptionality. So you might ask, what about a student that's speech only? Yes, they should be looked at for eligibility for the April Dunn Act. So if your child has a disability, an IEP, let's just say if your child has an IEP, and that IEP is not for gifted and talented with no secondary exceptionality, then your child should be examined by their IEP team for eligibility for the April Dunn Act. April Dunn does not apply to students who have an IAP or that are 504. They are not included. Only students identified with a disability as defined in 1508 IDEA. Okay? So, how does your child become eligible? The IEP team will determine April Dunn eligibility when your child meets one of the two requirements. The first way that your child can become eligible is when your child enters high school. What does that mean? Well, they're just finished with the 8th grade and they're moving to the 9th grade. So they enter high school without achieving, that means they didn't pass, the state established benchmarks on the LEAP 2025 state assessment for 2 of the 3 most recent years. Let's break this down. You ready? Your child is leaving the 8th grade, entering the 9th. I'm not sure if you know or not, but in the 6th grade, in the 7th grade, and in the 8th grade, your child takes LEAP assessments. Matter of fact, they start in the 3rd, but now they're about to start in 1st grade or kindergarten. I'm not sure if it's kindergarten, but I'm sure it's 1st grade. So your child takes state assessments. Courtney asked, why is 504 not eligible? That is how the law is written. Sorry, Courtney. So your child is entering the 9th grade. They took these LEAP assessments in the 6th, 7th, and 8th grade. So the IEP team is going to look at those the 3 most recent years, which typically are 6th, 7th, and 8th grade, right? And if your child did not pass, did not meet, the state says you got to score a certain score or above to be considered passing that LEAP. If your child did not score that score or higher, then they didn't pass. If they didn't pass 2 of the 3 most recent years, then they're eligible for April Dunn, entering the 9th grade. Okay? So that's for a child that enters the 9th grade, looking at the 3 most recent years, he or she doesn't pass 2 of those LEAP 2025 series of assessments, they're eligible for April Dunn. Okay. Now, here's the second way that a child can become eligible. The second way is they do not achieve or they don't pass the state established benchmarks after 2 attempts of the same LEAP 2025 high school assessment. Okay. So the assessments that they take in 6th, 7th, and 8th grade, those are not high school assessments. Those are middle school assessments. So let's say your child passed those. They met the state benchmark on 6th, 7th, and 8th grade assessments, right? And they enter the 9th grade and they're not eligible for April Dunn. Well, something very important for you to understand. Just because they enter high school ineligible does not mean that they should never be looked at again for eligibility for April Dunn. Because in the 9th grade, they're probably going to take English 1 and algebra. And if you remember earlier, I told you that English 1 and algebra has a LEAP 2025 assessment at the end of those courses. Well, let's say your child goes through English 1. At the end of that course, they face the LEAP 2025 English 1 state assessment, and they fail it. Well, Bessie says that they will go through some remediation, and they will take that test again. If they fail it a second time, the same assessment twice, they are now eligible for April Dunn. And it can be applied beginning in their 10th grade year. Can't go backwards. You can only go forward with April Dunn application. Okay? So IEP teams, once a student enters high school and they take one high school assessment, LEAP 2025 high school assessment, an IEP team must use this second criteria to examine eligibility. Once your child takes that first LEAP 2025 high school assessment, that IEP team can no longer look at the middle school, high school scores. So it's extremely important that you know what your child scores on their 6th, 7th, and 8th grade assessments. Okay? Because if your district somehow misses eligibility for your child and they enter the 9th grade and they take that first high school assessment, it doesn't matter if they should have been made eligible or not. They can no longer look back at those assessments. Okay? All right. Any questions about these two eligibility criteria? You can see it's very important that April Dunn be examined for a child entering the 9th grade. And then it's very important if a child is not eligible when they enter the 9th grade, that every time your child takes a LEAP 2025 high school assessment, eligibility should be examined again. Okay? Any questions? So this is, I kind of jumped the gun. This is the next slide, and that is, when should an IEP team examine eligibility? And there are several and then if they're ineligible when they enter, every time after they take a high school state assessment or a LEAP 2025. Not all courses have these assessments, just the core. And by core, we mean those core academic like English, math, social studies, science. So English 1, English 2, Algebra 1, geometry, biology, US history, soon to be civics, right? So at a minimum, your child's IEP team should examine eligibility at these points. Okay. So I thought it would help to bring in a couple of students. These are not real people, but I like to use sample students because if you're anything like me, I learn best by examples. Okay. So we're going to use Emma and Malik. And by the way, you can find full presentations on Emma's high school experiences online and Malik explaining like how they went through high school and how April Dunn was applied to their experiences. Okay. So Emma is our student that's entering the 9th grade, and Malik is currently a 10th grader. So we're going to start with Emma. Emma, like I said, she just finished 8th grade and she's entering the 9th. Her IEP team must determine if she's eligible for the April Dunn Act. To be eligible for the April Dunn Act, Emma must enter high school without having achieved the state established benchmarks on the LEAP 2025 state assessment for 2 of the 3 most recent years. So those LEAP tests that she took in the 6th, 7th, and 8th grade, that IEP team is going to look back over those LEAP assessments and they're going to see what she scored on them. All right. Now, let's talk about what Emma has to do to pass. This is what your child has to do to pass too. To pass a LEAP 2025 state assessment in these grades, Emma must score the following. So in 6th and 7th grade, Emma has to score at least a basic on at least 2 of the 4 assessments. So Emma's going to take 4 assessments at the end of 6th grade, 4 assessments at the end of 7th grade, ELA, math, science, and social studies. To be considered passing, Emma has to score at least a basic on 2 of the 4 assessments administered. If she scores a basic on science and social studies, bam, she's passed. Scores a basic on ELA social studies, bam, she's passed. Math, science, bam, she's passed. If she doesn't score 2 basics, she didn't pass. Okay. Now, 8th grade is a little different. Isn't that fun, right? 8th grade, it's all about ELA and math. They don't really look at science and social studies. It's all for this purpose, okay? They have to score at least a combo of basic and approaching basic in either ELA or math. ELA is English, y'all. Fancy English. Okay, English language arts. For example, your child would score AB, approaching basic, on the ELA assessment and basic on math. Or it could be exactly opposite. Approaching basic on math and basic on ELA. So it's a combination of the basic, approaching basic, all right, on the ELA and math scores. I'm not saying the district doesn't look at science and social studies. I'm saying for the purposes of this, we're looking at ELA and math. Okay? So that's what your child has to score on 6th, 7th, and 8th grade. In looking over the past test information, the IEP team starts looking at Emma's scores, right? Well, in the 6th grade, she scored unsatisfactory on ELA, basic on math, approaching basic on science, and approaching basic on social studies. Well, I don't see two basics. So Emma did not achieve what the state requires a child to achieve. So she did not meet the score. So this is one of the 2 years that she would need to become eligible for April Dunn. Remember, 2 of the past 3 years, if a child does not meet the state benchmark required on test, for 2 of the past 3 years, they are eligible entering the 9th grade for April Dunn. So we got 1 year, the 6th grade. So let's look at 7th grade. And when she got to the 7th grade and she took these assessments, she got unsatisfactory on ELA, approaching basic on math, basic on science, and basic on social studies. So guess what? Emma scored 2 basics. So she did meet. She did achieve the score required by the state in the 7th grade. So that's not a year that we can count towards being eligible for April Dunn. Well, let's see how she did in the 8th grade. In the 8th grade, she scored unsatisfactory on ELA and approaching basic on math. She did not achieve the score required by the state. Remember, the score required by the state in 8th grade is that combo score. Basic, approaching basic. Well, she didn't get that. She got approaching basic on math, but she would have needed a basic on ELA, and she got an unsat. So now, y'all, we have 2 years, 2 of the past 3 years that Emma did not meet the score that she needed to make as required by the state on those LEAP tests. So the IEP found that she did not meet, she did not pass the state required benchmarks on the LEAP 2025 state assessments in 2 of the 3 most recent years, the 6th and the 8th grade. Therefore, Emma is eligible for the April Dunn Act entering the 9th grade. Okay, now I'm going to pause right there because next we're going to do Malik. I want to make sure you understand Emma's situation before we move on. Are there any questions? The question that I see in the chat is, will these slides be available after the training? Actually, this training is already available. And I will show you how to get to this training at the end of this presentation. It's in the Students with Disabilities Library, which is on the Louisiana Believes website.
Thanks, Rebecca. And I'm actually dropping the link in the chat.
There you go. Thank you, Ashley. Any other questions? All right, let's go look at Malik. Here we go. Malik is a student that is entering the 10th. Now, unlike Emma, Malik was not eligible for the April Dunn Act when he entered the 9th grade. So he met the state benchmarks on his 6th, 7th, and 8th grade LEAPs. All right. So he's good to go. But he's in the 9th grade. He's about to enter the 10th. What does that mean? That means that he's taken some he's taken some courses, at least English 1 and algebra, that have a LEAP 2025 test at the end. So since entering high school, he has taken at least 1 LEAP 2025 state assessment. So parents, I want you to remember, once they take one of those high school assessments, you can't use the middle school scores anymore to determine eligibility. So it's important That's a very important part in your child's life when they're entering the 9th grade, is to make sure you know those scores so that you can help that IEP team make a determination. Okay. All right. So at the end of the 9th grade, Malik took a LEAP 2025 high school assessment. His IEP team checked him for eligibility after these tests. So at the end of the 9th grade, he took an Algebra 1 assessment. The IEP team found that he scored unsatisfactory on the LEAP 2025 Algebra 1 assessment. Remember, he's got to score at least an approaching basic. So Malik took summer remediation. After summer remediation, guess what he took again? He took the LEAP 2025 Algebra 1 assessment. Again, he scored unsat. Because Malik did not achieve or did not pass the state established benchmarks after 2 attempts of the same LEAP 2025 high school assessment, he is now eligible for the April Dunn Act as he goes into the 10th grade. Okay? All right, I'm going to pause for a minute. I see a question in the box. I understand the 2 different diploma routes and the process of eligibility for April Dunn. However, my question is, how does April Dunn impact the ACT? It does not. Or even after high school and college classes? It does not. No, there is not an extension of the law for college classes. This law only pertains to high school students. Good question, though, Katrina. All right. So any questions about Malik? Yes, you're right, Wallace. It only affects high school students with IEPs. You remember we just looked at which students can have April Dunn applied. If they're gifted and talented with no other exceptionality, they cannot be examined for eligibility for April Dunn. Okay. So when should an IEP team examine eligibility? Well, we've just looked at Emma and Malik, and we see that there are different times a student can be examined for eligibility. Emma was examined upon entering high school prior to the 9th grade. Malik was examined upon entering high school and found ineligible. Then he was examined again when he was in high school and took a state assessment. At a minimum, your child's IEP team should examine eligibility at these points, at a minimum. Because if they examined Malik and he was not eligible because he passed Algebra 1, guess what? He's got another couple of LEAP 2025 assessments coming up. So they should look at him again after those. All right? All right, now we're going to talk about those individual performance criteria or those goals and objectives. Okay. Do we have any questions? All right, I've got 5:50. I'm going to try to push this a little faster. We hoped to get out about 6, but listen, guys, I don't want to push it so fast that we get out of here and we don't really have a thorough understanding of April Dunn. Okay. So for a student with a disability eligible for the April Dunn Act, the IEP team can develop individual performance criteria or goals and objectives for the courses your child is taking. Now, remember, I said it's not for the course. It's for the assessment that goes with the course. Now, let me say something. The IEP team can develop goals and objectives under April Dunn for any course that your child takes. However, the department has no understanding of why, for example, an IEP team would develop goals and objectives for, say, art. Art does not have an associated LEAP 2025 assessment. And your child has to pass the course. They cannot pass the goals and objectives and say, oh, I passed the course. No, they cannot do that. They have to earn the Carnegie unit. So I don't understand. Ashley doesn't understand, if I can speak on her behalf, why an IEP team would develop goals and objectives related to April Dunn or apply April Dunn Act to something like art. April Dunn is meant to remove the roadblock of the state assessment from your child's life. Okay? So individual performance criteria allows students to show mastery of core standards through an alternate means. Remember, that's what that test does. That state assessment is your child's opportunity to show the state that they have mastered English 1, Algebra 1, US History, Biology, right? So what these goals and objectives do is, in lieu of that assessment, in place of that assessment, it allows them to achieve those goals and objectives to show that they've mastered the English course. These performance criteria are expressed in goals and objectives on the IEP. If your child achieves the goals and objectives, then for the purposes of that graduation requirement that we looked at, right, that state assessment requirement, they have achieved that state assessment requirement for that course. Okay? Now, important note, your child's still going to have to attempt the state assessments related to the course they take. They're not, it doesn't, April Dunn does not exempt them from attempting that test. Remember, whatever score they get on that assessment is figured into their grade. All right? So that's important. If you have a child that's eligible for April Dunn and they're applying it, the IEP team decides to apply it to one of these core classes like English 1, Algebra 1, Geometry, right? It's important that you have a conversation with your child. April Dunn is not a ticket to say, oh, I don't have to try my best on this test because I don't really have to pass it. Don't forget, I would have a conversation with my child and say, listen, honey, that grade, that score that you get on that test, even though you may not have to achieve an approaching basic, it's going to be figured into your score, your overall grade. So it's important that you give it 110%. Okay? And by the way, it accounts for 5% of your child's grade. It figures in 5%. Okay? The April Dunn Act does not give IEP teams the authority to compromise the standards or the requirements of any course. IEP teams are expected to develop individual performance criteria or goals and objectives that address the entire course. They're also expected to maintain rigor and high expectations of academic achievement. All right? You know, Katrina asked a question about college. Well, you know, Katrina, I would say if your child ends up with April Dunn being applied to their high school experiences, I firmly believe that you as a parent would not want your child's education compromised. Yes, you want to use every tool in your tool belt that you can to make sure your child is successful, but maintaining rigor and high expectations is something that is a must for your child when they enter college. So your child must achieve the requirements of the course. And if you feel the IEP team has failed to create rigorous individual performance criteria, speak up, say something. Now, let's talk about developing and applying those performance criteria, developing those goals and objectives. What should an IEP team do? What should a district do to make sure that rigor and high expectations are included? So the IEP team is responsible for developing and applying individual performance criteria to certain courses your child will be taking during the upcoming school year if they are eligible for April Dunn. And there's some key people that should be involved in your IEP meeting, right? You should have an administrator there. The teacher of the course wherein criteria is going to be applied. So if the IEP team decides to apply it to English 1, the English 1 teacher should be there. A special education teacher, the IEP holder, they should be there. And you should be there. And your child should be there to have these discussions, to make sure that high expectations and rigor and things are applied correctly. Okay? When creating performance criteria or goals and objectives, IEP team members should collaborate with all teachers to determine strategies and supports needed for your child. They should write measurable goals that reflect those strategies and supports. They should create goal-aligned objectives. You know, when you have a goal, that's like the umbrella. Then you have objectives. That's the handle. How do you break that goal down into different steps that should then, when they achieve those objectives, those should roll up into achievement of the goal, right? That's good goal and objective writing. They should ensure that the performance criteria or the goals and objectives maintain rigorous learning expectations and that they're aligned to the course. If you're going to apply them to English 1, think about it like this. What does the LEAP 2025 English 1 assessment test? It tests all of the benchmarks, all of the standards that your child is expected to learn while they're in English 1 class. So those goals and objectives should encapsulate, should capture those benchmarks. Now, I'm not saying there has to be 79 objectives, okay? Matter of fact, if you'd like to see some examples of goals and objectives, the state has given districts those examples, and they're included in a document that I can show you in the Students with Disabilities Library, all right? Now, this is very important. This last bullet is extremely important. These goals and objectives have to be developed and applied in the IEP within the first 30 days of your child entering that course. If your child is entering Algebra 1 on August 1, the clock starts ticking. That IEP team has 30 days to write goals and objectives and apply them to that course. Okay? Now you ask, are those 30 school days or are they 30 calendar days? The law does not say. All the law says is 30 days. So your district will make a decision as to what they're counting. Are they counting school days or are they counting calendar days? So that's another question you might want to ask. Okay. So there should be some thought that goes into choosing certain courses. Which courses should you apply April Dunn to? Which courses should you write goals and objectives for? Well, first of all, you need to make sure that your child's strengths and weaknesses have been identified. For example, if your child has had a weakness and has shown a weakness in English, then I would definitely apply goals and objectives to English 1 and English 2. Now, it could be that that also may affect math because, you know, there's reading and all kinds of good stuff in math, right? So should you apply it? I think you need to look at the data along with your IEP team. And when in doubt, it does not hurt to apply April Dunn to your core classes or to a class that has a LEAP 2025 assessment. It's sort of a safety net, right? You just want to make sure that your child understands it's not a crutch. They still need to do their best. They have to pass the course, and that score that they get on that assessment is going to figure in to passing that course. So you're going to review data with your IEP team, state assessment scores, performance on student learning targets, course grades. What kind of grades did they make in English and math and science and social studies in middle school? What about any kind of benchmark assessments that they took? What did they score on that? Review your child's IGP. So each child should have an individual graduation plan when they enter high school. What's coming up? How do you know what to apply it to? Well, you should have a schedule, and you should have the requirements, the assessment requirements before you. What about an IBC? Well, you can apply it to an IBC. Now, if they don't pass that test, they cannot get the IBC, but for the purposes of graduation, they'll fulfill that requirement on that Jumpstart pathway, right? So if they are in welding and they take a welding test, right, a certification test, the IEP team, for example, I think there's like 9 modules in welding that they test. Okay. If not, we're going to make it up tonight, right? So there's 9 modules. Let's say there's 9 modules. Well, the IEP team can say, well, if Johnny, the goal could be if Johnny passes or achieves benchmark on 4 to 7 modules, then for the purposes of graduation, he will achieve that graduation requirement of an IBC. He won't get the IBC. We cannot change the industry standard. That standard is set in stone by that industry. So he won't get that IBC. He won't be a certified welder, but for the purposes of graduation, he will fulfill that IBC requirement via the April Dunn Act and be able to graduate with a diploma. Okay. You should determine on a course-by-course basis if the individual performance should be established or applied. All right. If an IEP, if a district person walks in and says, we apply it to all assessments, then maybe you want to say, hang on a minute. You know, my child is really, really good in math. Maybe we should make him really try and see if he can pass that. Give him a chance, right? But that's up to you. I'm not telling you what to do. I'm just giving you different ideas of how you can make decisions as to what courses to apply it to or not. Okay? All right, I'm going to pause for a minute, ask if there's any questions.
No questions.
Thanks, ma'am. Okay, how can you help your child succeed? We've talked about some of these along the way, but I think it's worth a review. And you can, if you print this presentation out, you've got some nifty, some handy tips for helping your child succeed, okay? So as a parent of a child with a disability, there are some action steps you can take to ensure, 1, your child is examined for eligibility, and 2, that the IEP team applies the provisions in a timely manner while upholding rigorous and high expectations. Let's take a look at the action steps. Action step number 1. Know when your child will and should be examined for eligibility. Your child should be examined for eligibility for the April Dunn Act upon entering the 9th grade. And if they're ineligible upon entering the 9th grade, they should be examined again in high school after taking any LEAP 2025 state assessment. Be prepared to discuss your child's eligibility for the April Dunn Act when they're entering the 9th grade, like Emma. Then, if your child's not eligible upon entering high school, be prepared to re-examine eligibility each time your child takes a high school state assessment, like Malik. If your child's IEP team does not discuss the April Dunn Act, please ask about the law and when your child will be examined for eligibility. Action step number 2, know your child's assessment scores. Your child meets eligibility for the April Dunn Act when they enter high school without having achieved the state established benchmark on the LEAP 2025 state assessment for 2 of the 3 most recent years, or they do not achieve the state established benchmark after 2 attempts of the same LEAP 2025 high school assessment. Eligibility for the April Dunn Act is based on LEAP state assessment scores. Knowing the scores your child makes on a LEAP 2025 state assessment beginning in the 6th grade would be useful information to bring an IEP meeting for discussing eligibility for the April Dunn Act. All right. Action step number 3. Know when the April Dunn Act must be applied to your child's courses. The law requires April Dunn to be applied to a course within the first 30 days of a student entering the course. Note, it's extremely important that your child's IEP team review eligibility for the law and establish alternate means or goals and objectives prior to the 30-day deadline. Now, I will tell you this. A child can be made eligible for the April Dunn any time of the school year. Matter of fact, some IEP teams sorry, y'all, I have a student that is not being cooperative. Some IEP teams hold eligibility meetings during the summer in between the 8th and 9th grade year. Now, in order to apply, application has to be done within the first 30 days. All right. And then there's action step number 4. Review the individual performance criteria or the goals and objectives to ensure they maintain rigor and high expectations required of any other student. The April Dunn Act does not give the IEP team the authority to compromise the standards or the requirements of any course. And y'all, as parents, I want you to know that applying April Dunn should not compromise your child's high school experiences. You shouldn't worry that they're not going to be able to make it in college. That's how it's supposed to work. And you're one of those team members of the IEP team. So it's going to be up to you to also serve as a gatekeeper and make sure that there's high expectations. You got to keep that end in sight. They're going to go to college. If they're going to go to college or community college, got to make sure those expectations are there, okay? IEP teams are expected to develop goals and objectives that address the entire course, maintain the rigor and expectations of academic achievement, and do not compromise the standards of the course. Okay? Any questions about the action steps? All right, I have about 10 minutes after 6. We should be finished in about the next 10 to 15 minutes. All right, so let's look at a resource for you. So the Louisiana Department of Education has resources related to the April Dunn Act available for you. The April Dunn Act, an alternate means to graduation for students with disabilities. It's a great resource. Y'all, this document is probably about 25 to 30 pages long. And remember, I told you that there is a document that has sample goals and objectives and what the state expects. Well, that document is one of the appendix on this document right here. So you can, if you find this document that's named and go through to the very end of that, you'll see what I'm talking about. So the next several slides, I'm going to direct you to the Students with Disabilities Library, a library full of information, including the April Dunn Act information. So the very first thing you're going to do is you're going to navigate to the Louisiana Believes website. This is it's louisianabelieves.com. And by the way, this presentation, these are hot links, right? So you can see right there, www.louisianabelieves.com. All right. So you go to louisianabelieves.com and you're going to go look at the very top and click on the word library. You can see it circled right there in orange. From library, I like to say, stay to the right. You're going to stay to the right, look at the right, and you're going to pick category. On the next screen, you're going to go to the right under teaching and learning, and you're going to pick students with disabilities. Now, I don't want you to get confused and pick students with significant cognitive disabilities. I want you to pick students with disabilities, highlighted in yellow. Okay. Then this is actually the Students with Disabilities Library. So you're going to scroll about halfway down this page. And again, on the right, you're going to see the April Dunn Act resources. And do you see this very first document right here? April Dunn Act, an alternate means to graduation for students with disabilities. That's the document I just mentioned. And let's see. You know what? At the time that I took this picture, yeah, this presentation was not yet posted, but it is now. The family presentation is now posted, and it's in this area right here. Okay. And I think Ashley dropped a link into the chat box for the Students with Disabilities Library. Okay, questions, comments, concerns. There's a contact email address, specialeducation@la.gov. We also have given you our personal email addresses. Ashley and I have. If you need some assistance or have a situation you want to talk about, if you email me, just make sure you copy Ashley too. Any questions? I'm going to be quiet now for the next couple of minutes and see if there are any questions. All right, Ashley just added her email address again. So did I, just for easy access. Wallace, thanks. Wallace added the link again. All right. If we have no other questions, hey, Leanne, you have a great week too. Thanks. I want to thank everybody for joining us tonight. I really appreciate it. It's really nice to get a chance and opportunity. It's an honor to have an opportunity to talk to parents about the April Dunn Act and how it should be done and the expectations that the department has. So if you have any questions, please feel free to email. And other than that, I'm going to turn it back over to one of you guys. I'm not sure who to turn it back over to.
Well, thank you so much, Ms. Hanberry. I've really enjoyed every nugget that you've dropped. You are so thorough and detailed and to the point. I can't say how much I appreciate you. My daughter is in high school and I have a middle schooler as well. And it was all necessary information. So thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you all for joining. Chanel, is there anything else?
I don't have anything else to say. I just want to echo everything Zandra said. Thank you, everyone, for joining us. Thank you, Rebecca, for your knowledge. As always, you have definitely taught me some new information that I was not aware of. Wallace, is there anything you want to say before we close it out?
I'm good. Thank you everyone for attending. I'm glad y'all were here.
Yes, and thank you to Ashley for moderating for us and keeping an eye on the chat. So again, we just want to thank you guys for joining us tonight. We are going to let you go and enjoy the rest of your night. When this webinar ends, there will be a survey that will come up, a webinar evaluation. If you could please fill that out for us, we would just really love it. If there's another webinar that you would like for us to do, please put that in the comment section. And if you need a certificate, please also put that in the comment section of your evaluation. Put your name and your email address so we will know who to send the certificate to. Also, this presentation will be uploaded to our YouTube channel, which is Families Helping Families Region 7. So in a couple of days, you can find it there if you would like a playback. So again, we want to thank you for joining us tonight, and good night.
Good night. Thank you, everyone.